The afternoon was quiet in the small town, the kind of afternoon where the streets seemed almost empty and the soft sound of footsteps could be heard more clearly than usual. A little black girl, not more than 8 years old, walked slowly down the sidewalk. Her small hands clutched a coin purse that looked worn out, the fabric faded from being used too many times. She looked at every store she passed with curious eyes, but her steps were slow, almost unsure. There was something different about her walk that day. It wasn't the walk of a child coming to buy candy or a toy. Her eyes showed determination, but her heart carried a question far too heavy for someone her age. She finally stopped outside a store that had a warm glow inside. The window displayed toys, books, and some small gifts. It was a place children often loved to visit, but this girl didn't look excited. She stood still for a moment, whispering something to herself as if she was practicing what she wanted to say. Then, gathering all her courage, she pushed the glass door open. A small bell above the door chimed, and the sound echoed gently through the shop. Behind the counter stood the shopkeeper, a man in his late 50s. He had kind but tired eyes, and though he wore simple clothes, there was a calm dignity about him. His hands rested on the counter as he looked up and saw the girl. He gave her a smile, the kind that made people feel safe. To anyone else, he looked like just another store owner running his shop in a quiet town. But no one knew the truth about him. He was not just an ordinary man. He was a billionaire, a man with more money than he could ever spend, but who had chosen to live quietly, away from the noise of wealth. That secret was hidden carefully, and the townspeople only saw him as the friendly owner of the little gift shop. The girl walked slowly toward the counter. Her shoes were small and scuffed, the laces loose and uneven. Her dress was clean but clearly old, with patches carefully stitched on by a loving hand. She clutched her coin purse tightly as if it held her entire world. The shopkeeper watched her with gentle curiosity, sensing that this visit was different from what he usually saw from children. When she reached the counter, she looked up at him with wide eyes. Her lips trembled slightly, but she didn't look away. She took a deep breath, and then, in a soft but steady voice, she said words that the man would never forget for the rest of his life. "I want to buy a dad." The shop went completely silent. For a moment, the man wasn't sure if he had heard her correctly. His smile faded into surprise, and his heart skipped a beat. He looked around, almost expecting that someone might come in and explain this unusual request, but it was just the two of them. The little girl kept staring at him, her face serious, her eyes filled with hope. He leaned forward slightly, his voice careful and soft. "What did you say, sweetheart?" She tightened her grip on the coin purse and repeated, this time even more clearly, "I want to buy a dad." "Do you sell dads here?" The man's chest tightened. His throat felt dry. He had spent his life in boardrooms and mansions, making deals worth millions, but never in all those years had he heard words that could cut so deep and so fast. He searched for a response, but his heart was already aching for the little girl standing before him. Why do you want to buy a dad?" he asked gently, trying not to let his emotions show. The girl's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Because I don't have one," she whispered. "Other kids have dads. They come to school, they hold their hands, they pick them up, and they give them hugs. I don't have that. My mom works all the time. She's so tired. I don't want toys, I don't want candy. I just want a dad. And I have money." She quickly opened her coin purse and spilled its contents onto the counter. A few crumpled dollar bills, some coins, and a button that must have slipped inside by mistake. She looked at the pile with pride, as if she had placed a treasure chest on the counter. "This is all I have. Is it enough?" The shopkeeper couldn't speak for a moment. His eyes softened, and he felt his hands shake slightly. This was not a child asking for something silly. This was a child carrying a loneliness so deep that she believed it could be solved with the few dollars she had saved. He looked at the little pile of money, then at her small, expectant face. He wanted to reach across the counter and hold her, to tell her everything would be okay. But he also knew that no words could instantly heal the emptiness she felt. He slowly sat down on the stool behind the counter so he could be at her eye level. "Sweetheart," he said softly, "I don't sell dads here. But tell me, what made you think you could buy one?" The girl looked down at her shoes and fidgeted. "Because people say you can buy anything if you have money. And I thought, maybe if I try hard enough, maybe someone will sell me a dad. Someone who can take care of me and love me and just be there." Her voice broke, and a tear rolled down her cheek. She quickly wiped it away with the back of her hand, embarrassed to cry in front of him. The shopkeeper's heart broke even more. He wanted to tell her that money couldn't buy the love she wanted, but at the same time, he didn't want to crush the tiny flame of hope that had brought her into his shop. He reached behind the counter and pulled out a cookie from a jar. He placed it in her hand. "Here, eat this while we talk," he said gently. She looked at the cookie, then back at him, and slowly took a bite. The sweetness must have comforted her a little because her shoulders relaxed slightly. "What's your name?" he asked. "Amara," she said softly. "That's a beautiful name," he replied with a smile. "And your mom? She works a lot, doesn't she?" Amara nodded. "Yes. She cleans houses and works at a diner. She comes home very late and sometimes she's too tired to even eat. I don't want to make her sad, but I feel so lonely. That's why I came here." The man listened carefully, his chest heavy with emotions he hadn't felt in years. In his life as a billionaire, he had met leaders, celebrities, and powerful people, but never had he met someone who spoke with such pure honesty. This little girl had no idea who he really was. To her, he was just a store owner. And maybe that was why her words touched him so deeply. She wasn't trying to impress him, she was just speaking from her heart. As Amara finished her cookie, she carefully pushed her small pile of money back toward him. "Please," she whispered, "if you don't have a dad to sell, maybe you know where I can find one." The shopkeeper felt a lump in his throat. He couldn't answer right away. He knew this moment would stay with him forever. He looked into her eyes, filled with both innocence and pain, and he silently promised himself that this was not the end of their story. The store felt different after that conversation. The man who owned it, known in town as a simple shopkeeper, found himself lost in thought even after Amara left. She had walked out holding the cookie he gave her, waving politely before disappearing down the street. But her words stayed behind, filling the air like an echo he could not silence. "I want to buy a dad." No meeting in his business life, no deal worth millions, no encounter with powerful people had ever moved him like that. Her small voice carried more truth and weight than the loudest speeches he had ever heard. The following morning, when the man opened his shop, he caught himself looking at the door every few minutes, half expecting Amara to come back. He arranged toys on the shelves, but his mind was far away. He remembered the pile of coins and small bills she had placed on his counter with such pride. She believed with all her heart that money could buy her a father. That innocence, mixed with her pain, had touched him so deeply that he could not let it go. Later in the day, when the shop was quiet, Amara returned. This time she didn't come alone. She walked in holding a small school bag, and her eyes lit up when she saw him. The man smiled warmly. "Amara, you're back," he said softly. She nodded and approached the counter. "I came to see if maybe you thought about what I asked yesterday," she said. Her voice was hopeful, but also shy, as if afraid he might laugh at her. He didn't laugh. Instead, he invited her to sit on the stool near the counter. He handed her another cookie and poured her a small cup of milk. "Tell me more, Amara," he said gently. Why do you feel you need to buy a dad? She looked at him with wide eyes, then down at her school bag. She slowly unzipped it and pulled out a drawing. It was a crayon picture of a little girl holding hands with a tall man. In the drawing, both of them were smiling under a big sun. She placed it on the counter and said, "This is what I dream about. Someone who walks me to school, someone who comes to my school plays, someone who tells me bedtime stories. My mom is amazing, but she's always so tired. I don't want her to worry about me. I thought maybe if I bought a dad, she would smile more." The man felt his throat tighten. He looked at the drawing carefully, the uneven lines, the bright colors, the hope in every stroke. He realized this wasn't just a child's imagination, it was her heart speaking on paper. He wanted to tell her that no amount of money could buy love, but he could see she wasn't asking for toys or gifts. She was asking for presents, for care, for something priceless. "Your mom must love you very much," the man said softly. Amara nodded quickly. "She does. She works so hard just for me. Sometimes she falls asleep in her chair after work. I cover her with a blanket. I don't want her to think I'm sad, but I feel something missing. That's why I thought maybe, just maybe, I could fix it with money." The man felt something stir deep within him. For years, he had lived quietly, hiding his wealth behind the walls of this small town store. People thought he was ordinary, but he had billions locked away in banks and investments. He had everything money could buy: cars, houses, companies, but none of it had given him peace. And now, in front of him, a child with almost nothing believed she could buy the one thing he had never truly known either, the warmth of family love. He leaned forward and said, "Amara, money is good for buying food, clothes, and things we need. But there are some things money can't buy. Love is one of them. A dad is not something for sale." Amara's little face fell. She looked at her coin purse and sighed. "So it's not enough," she whispered. The man quickly shook his head. "No, no, sweetheart. It's not that. Your money isn't the problem. It's just, what you want can't be bought in any store. But it can be found in life. Sometimes, the people we meet can become like family, even if they're not the ones we're born with." She tilted her head, trying to understand. "You mean, I could find someone who wants to be a dad even if I don't buy him?" He smiled gently. "Yes. Sometimes love comes freely. And sometimes, when people see someone as kind and honest as you, they want to care for you because you deserve it, not because you paid for it." Amara sat quietly, thinking about his words. She was young, but she could feel the truth in what he said. Still, she held onto her coin purse. "But what if nobody wants me?" she asked softly. Those words broke him. He wanted to tell her she was more valuable than gold, more precious than all the riches in the world. He wanted to promise her that someone would always want her, always love her. But he also knew promises carried weight, and he couldn't say the words lightly. Instead, he reached across the counter and placed his hand gently over hers. "Amara, you are a treasure. Anyone would be lucky to have you in their life. Never think nobody wants you. You are wanted, even if you don't see it yet." Her eyes softened, and for the first time, she smiled a little. The man felt something inside him shift. This wasn't just a chance meeting. This was a turning point. He realized he couldn't simply let her walk away and forget about it. He had to do something. When Amara left the shop that day, the man followed her at a distance. He watched as she walked down the road, turning into a small street lined with old houses. He saw her run up the steps of a tiny home where her mother stood at the door, her face tired but warm. The mother hugged her daughter tightly before leading her inside. The man stood across the street, watching quietly. His heart ached. He had billions, but here was a family living with so little, working so hard just to get through each day. That night, as he sat alone in his modest room above the store, he couldn't sleep. Amara's words replayed in his mind. He thought about her drawing, her smile, and her question, "What if nobody wants me?" It was as if those words had been written directly on his heart. He pulled out an old notebook and began writing. He listed ways he could help without frightening them with his wealth. He could quietly pay for school supplies. He could leave groceries at their door. He could make sure Amara never felt left out again. He knew he couldn't buy her a father, but maybe he could be the person who showed her that love and care didn't need to come with a price tag. The man closed his notebook and looked out the window at the quiet street. For the first time in many years, he felt a sense of purpose. It wasn't about business, or deals, or money. It was about a little girl who walked into his shop with a coin purse and a broken heart. And he knew deep down that this was only the beginning of their story. The days that followed were different for the man. Every morning when he unlocked the small shop, he found himself hoping Amara would come again. She had become more than just a customer. She was now a little girl who had placed a question in his heart that he could not shake off. Her innocent wish, her simple words, had awakened something inside him that had been asleep for years. He felt like he had been given a new responsibility, though she never asked him directly for anything more than her dream of a father. He began noticing small things in her life, quietly and from a distance. After she left his store, he had followed her to see where she lived. The small house she entered looked old, its paint peeling, its windows cracked. It stood at the end of a street where many families worked long hours just to survive. Through the days, he observed from afar. Amara would wake up early, carrying a small school bag that looked far too heavy for her little shoulders. Sometimes she walked to school alone, dragging her feet, while other times a neighbor's child would join her. Her mother often left before sunrise, rushing to her first job, her face showing the exhaustion of someone who carried the weight of the world every day. The man had never been close to children before. In his wealthy life, children around him usually belonged to other billionaires, cared for by nannies, dressed in expensive clothes. They lived lives that looked perfect from the outside. But Amara was different. She didn't have much, yet she carried a heart bigger than most adults he knew. She didn't cry for toys or demand sweets. She longed for love. And that longing touched him in a way no riches ever had. Quietly, he started doing small things. One evening, when Amara and her mother were still out, he left a bag of groceries at their doorstep. It had milk, bread, fresh fruit, and a few extra things he thought they might enjoy. The next morning, he watched from a distance as Amara discovered it. She looked surprised, then ran inside with a big smile. The man felt his chest lighten. That one small act had brought her joy, and it filled him with a feeling he hadn't known for years. At school, Amara often sat by herself. The man had spoken with one of the teachers quietly, pretending to be just a curious shop owner. He learned that Amara was polite and hard-working, but she didn't always have the books or supplies needed for class. The next day, new notebooks, pencils, and crayons appeared in her school bag, slipped inside while she wasn't looking. When she opened her bag later and found them, she had no idea where they came from, but her smile that day was brighter than the sun. Each time the man saw her happy, his heart softened more. Yet, he also felt the weight of her question. She had asked to buy a dad, and though he had told her love could not be bought, he couldn't ignore that she was still missing something that her little heart desired. He thought about his own life. He had spent years building companies, making money, buying properties, but none of it had ever made him feel the way Amara's smile did when she discovered a kind surprise. At night, he would sit by his window, staring at the stars, remembering the way she had whispered, "What if nobody wants me?" Those words replayed again and again. He thought about his own childhood, how he had grown up in a house full of wealth but empty of affection. His parents had been too busy with their business empire to notice his small needs. He had known what it felt like to be unwanted, even in a mansion. That was why her words cut so deeply, because he saw himself in her loneliness. The more he thought, the more he realized that he wanted to do more than just help with food and school supplies. He wanted to be part of her life. He wanted to be the one she could run to, the one she could share her drawings with, the one who told her she was special. He wanted to give her the love he had longed for as a child, but never received. One evening, as he was closing the store, Amara came in again. She walked slowly, her face sad. She climbed onto the stool near the counter and placed her coin purse on the table. "I still haven't found a dad," she whispered. "I thought maybe if I try again." She pushed the purse toward him, her little hands trembling. The man's heart broke. He reached for the purse but only to push it back toward her. "Amara," he said softly, "you don't need to pay for love. You already deserve it. You are enough just as you are." She looked at him with teary eyes. "Then why don't I have it?" He swallowed hard, his chest aching. "Sometimes life makes us wait for the right people. But that doesn't mean you're not loved. It just means your story is still being written." Amara wiped her tears and nodded quietly, though she didn't fully understand. She reached into her school bag and pulled out another drawing. This one showed three figures: a little girl, a mother, and a man standing beside them. She pushed it toward him and said softly, "This is my family in my dream. I want it to be real one day." The man stared at the drawing for a long time. He could feel something stirring inside him that was stronger than anything he had felt in business or wealth. He didn't just want to help her from a distance anymore. He wanted to step into her life, to be part of that dream she had drawn with her crayons. That night, he walked back to his room with the drawing in his hands. He placed it on his table and stared at it for hours. He knew then that his life was about to change. He couldn't remain just the quiet shopkeeper anymore. He had found a reason to use his wealth, not for himself, but to give love, safety, and joy to someone who truly needed it. He made a silent promise to himself as he blew out the lamp and went to bed: Amara would never again feel like nobody wanted her. As long as he lived, she would know she was wanted, loved, and cherished. He didn't know how he would explain it to her yet, but he knew his heart had already made the choice. The sun was bright the next morning, but inside the man's heart there was a storm of feelings. He opened his little shop as usual, but nothing felt usual anymore. Every sound, every face reminded him of Amara. He thought of the drawing she had left with him, the one where she had placed herself, her mother, and a father figure together. He had placed that drawing on his nightstand, and it had been the first thing he saw when he woke up. It was a simple picture drawn with crayons, but for him, it was more valuable than the expensive paintings he owned in his mansions around the world. The shop was busier that day, with customers buying gifts and toys. But even while he greeted them politely, his eyes would often drift to the door, hoping Amara would appear. At noon, when the shop was quiet, he finally saw her. She walked in slowly, holding her school bag. But this time her face was not smiling. Her eyes were red, her cheeks wet from tears. She climbed onto the stool and sat without saying a word. The man felt his heart squeeze. "Amara," he said gently, "what happened?" She sniffled, trying to hold back more tears. "Some kids at school made fun of me," she whispered. "They said I don't have a dad, and they laughed. They asked me if I could buy one with my pennies. Everyone laughed." The man felt anger rise in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. He leaned closer and said, "I am so sorry they said that. They were wrong to hurt you. You are special, Amara, and not having a dad doesn't make you less than anyone else." She wiped her eyes with her sleeve. "But it hurts," she said softly. "I told them I would find one day. They laughed even more." She buried her face in her hands. The man wanted to reach out and protect her from the whole world. For years he had lived in silence, hiding his true self as a billionaire, but in that moment, he realized he couldn't keep hiding. His wealth, his power, his influence, none of it mattered unless he used it for something good. Amara needed more than kind words. She needed someone who could stand beside her, someone who could show her that she was not alone. Just as he was about to comfort her, the sound of a car horn echoed outside. A black luxury car stopped in front of the store, and two men in suits stepped out. They walked quickly toward the door. The shopkeeper froze. He recognized them immediately. They were his security men, the ones who followed him quietly whenever there was an urgent matter. The door opened, and the two men entered. They looked out of place in the small town shop, their sharp suits and earpieces showing who they really were. One of them bowed slightly. "Sir," he said, "the board is waiting. The meeting is urgent. We must leave now." The store fell silent. Amara looked up in shock. She glanced at the suited men, then at the shopkeeper. "Sir," she whispered. Her eyes widened as the realization hit her. You're not just a store owner." The man sighed. He had kept his secret hidden for years, but it was out now. The other customers in the shop began whispering, their eyes wide. The shopkeeper stood, his calm eyes meeting Amara's. "I didn't want anyone to know," he said softly. "Yes, I am more than a store owner. I am a very wealthy man. But here, I just wanted to live a quiet life." Amara's mouth dropped open. "You're a billionaire." The suited men shifted uncomfortably. They didn't want the word spoken out loud, but the girl had said it. The other customers gasped. Some looked amazed, others doubtful. But the truth was clear: the humble shopkeeper was in fact a man of unimaginable wealth. Amara stared at him, confused. "Why would someone like you work in a small shop?" The man knelt down beside her stool so his eyes were level with hers. His voice was soft but steady. "Because money does not give happiness, Amara. I tried living with all of it: mansions, cars, luxury, but my heart was still empty. I came here to live simply, to find something real. And then you walked into my shop and told me the one thing I had never heard before. You wanted to buy a dad. Do you know what that did to me?" Amara shook her head, wiping her tears. He smiled sadly. "It reminded me that love and care cannot be bought, not even with billions. It showed me what really matters in life." The room was still. Even the other customers who had stayed to watch were quiet. The security men stood at the door, waiting, but the man ignored them. His heart was with the little girl in front of him. Amara's voice trembled. "So, you can't sell me a dad. But, can you, be one?" The man felt tears prick his eyes. He reached out and gently held her small hands. "Amara, I cannot replace the father you never had. But I can promise you this: you will never be alone again. You will always have someone who cares for you, protects you, and stands by your side. If you allow me, I would like to be that person for you." Amara blinked up at him, her eyes wide. For a moment, she couldn't speak. Then slowly, a small smile spread across her face. "You mean I don't have to buy it? You'll just give it?" He chuckled softly through the lump in his throat. "Yes, sweetheart. Love is free. The best things in life always are." The other customers in the shop, who had been silent witnesses, wiped their eyes. Some clapped quietly, touched by the moment. The security men looked at each other, then back at their boss, realizing they had just witnessed something far more important than any business deal. Amara leaned forward and hugged him tightly. Her small arms wrapped around his neck, and in that embrace, the man felt a kind of joy he had never known before. It wasn't the joy of signing a contract, or buying a company, or adding more numbers to his fortune. It was the joy of finally belonging, of finally giving love and receiving it in return. As he held her, he whispered softly, "From today, you'll never feel unwanted again." Amara pulled back and looked at him with shining eyes. Then, "I'm not alone anymore." He shook his head firmly. "Never again." Outside, the luxury car still waited, but inside the shop, something far greater had taken place. The billionaire had revealed his secret, not to impress anyone, but to show one little girl that her wish for love was not impossible. And in that moment, Amara's dream drawing of a family no longer felt like just a dream. It had begun to come true. The days after that moment in the shop were unlike anything the little town had ever seen. The whispers spread quickly. People who had known the shopkeeper for years suddenly discovered that he was not just a simple man behind a counter. He was one of the wealthiest men in the country, a billionaire who had chosen to live quietly in their small town. At first, the townsfolk were stunned, some even doubtful. But the story of the little black girl who had walked into his store with a coin purse and asked to buy a dad became something everyone remembered. For Amara, life began to change in ways she could not have imagined. She returned to school with a lightness in her step. The kids who once teased her grew quiet when they saw her walking beside the shopkeeper, who now openly treated her with care like a father would. He attended one of her school events for the first time, sitting proudly in the audience. Amara had never before looked out into a crowd and seen someone there just for her. That day, when she recited a poem in front of her classmates, her eyes searched for him, and when she found his smile, her own voice grew stronger. For the first time, she didn't feel small or invisible. She felt seen. At home, her mother noticed the change too. At first, she had been wary when she discovered that the kind store owner was actually a billionaire. She feared pity, she feared charity, and she didn't want her daughter's heart to be hurt by promises that might not last. But the man did not come to them with gifts of gold or flashy cars. He came with simple actions: repairing the roof of their house quietly, ensuring her daughter had meals she loved, and most importantly, spending time with Amara. Slowly, her mother's fear melted away, replaced by gratitude. She could see the sparkle in her daughter's eyes, a sparkle she had not seen for years. One evening, the man visited their home for dinner. The small living room smelled of warm food, and Amara's mother had cooked her best dish, even though she kept apologizing that it wasn't fancy. The billionaire sat at the small wooden table, more comfortable there than in the dining halls of his mansions. Amara sat beside him, talking excitedly about her day at school, showing him her drawings. He listened carefully, as if every word she said was the most important thing in the world. Her mother watched silently, her heart full. For the first time, her daughter was laughing without hiding her loneliness. After dinner, Amara took out her old coin purse and placed it on the table. "I don't need this anymore," she said softly. "I don't have to buy a dad now. I have one." The man's eyes filled with tears. He reached over and gently pushed the coin purse back to her. "Keep it, Amara. Not because you need to buy anything, but because it will always remind you how brave you were to come into my shop that day. It was your courage that changed everything." She hugged him tightly, and in that embrace, something healed inside both of them. For Amara, it was the wound of loneliness. For the man, it was the emptiness of living a life without real love. Word of the story reached further than the town. Journalists tried to come, cameras tried to follow, but the man politely refused attention. This wasn't a story for headlines, it was a story of a little girl and her dream. What mattered was not what the world thought, but what Amara felt. He made it clear to everyone that this wasn't about charity, it wasn't about wealth, it was about family. Over the weeks, the man became a true father figure to Amara. He walked her to school, held her hand when she crossed the street, and sat with her while she did her homework. Sometimes they went to the park, where Amara would run freely, laughing loudly, while he sat on a bench watching her with pride. Other times, they would read books together in the shop after hours. The once quiet store now echoed with the sound of her giggles. Customers noticed the change, and many smiled warmly when they saw the bond growing between the two. One Sunday morning, the man invited Amara and her mother to visit one of his homes outside town. It was not the grandest mansion he owned, but a cozy place surrounded by gardens. Amara's eyes widened as she explored the rooms. To her, it was like stepping into a fairy tale. But what touched her most wasn't the size of the house or the beauty of the garden, it was that the man introduced it as our home. He told her, "This is where you will always have a place, Amara. No matter where life takes you, this door will always be open for you." Her mother listened with tears in her eyes. For years, she had carried the burden of raising her child alone, feeling guilty for not giving her enough time or comfort. Now, she saw a man willingly sharing that responsibility, not out of obligation, but out of genuine love. As weeks turned into months, the bond only grew stronger. Amara no longer felt like the girl with nothing. She felt rich in ways that had nothing to do with money. She had someone who listened, someone who cared, someone who stood proudly beside her. The drawing she once made of her dream family was no longer just crayons on paper, it was her life now. For the man, his life changed even more. The billions he once thought were his greatest treasure now seemed small compared to the laughter of a little girl. He still attended meetings when necessary, but his priorities shifted. The boardroom was no longer his whole world, his world now sat across the dinner table, telling him stories about school. His security team, once busy protecting a man of wealth, now quietly watched over a man who had found something worth far more than money. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, the man and Amara sat on the porch of the little shop. The streets were quiet, and the air was filled with the soft sounds of crickets. Amara leaned against him, holding his hand. "Do you know something?" she asked softly. "What's that, sweetheart?" he replied. She looked up at him with a gentle smile. "I think I'm the richest girl in the world now. Not because of money, but because I have you." The man felt his eyes grow wet, and he pulled her close. "And I am the richest man in the world," he whispered, "because I have you." In that quiet town, under the soft glow of the evening, a little girl who once believed she had to buy love discovered that love cannot be bought, it can only be given. And a billionaire who once had everything discovered that the greatest wealth of all was not in banks or businesses, but in the heart of a child who finally felt wanted. From that day forward, whenever Amara walked past the shop window, she no longer pressed her face to see toys or books. She simply smiled, knowing that inside those walls was where her story had changed forever. And the man, who once hid his identity from the world, no longer felt the need to hide. He had found his place, his family, and his purpose in the simple words of a child who had once walked in with a coin purse and a dream. Their story became more than just whispers in town. It became a reminder for everyone who heard it: love is never for sale, but it is always the greatest gift we can give and receive.